Good day, everyone. Today I will be discussing my research proposal entitled The Role of Teacher Feedback in Enhancing Language Acquisition and Student Motivation. Now, for the rationale, language acquisition and student motivation are critical components of effective education, particularly in the context of English language learners in senior high school. In classrooms where English is a second or foreign language, learners often face challenges in developing linguistic competence and sustaining motivation. One vital factor that can influence both language acquisition and motivation is the quality and type of feedback provided by teachers. This research study, titled The Role of a Teacher Feedback in Enhancing Language Acquisition Motivation, aims to explore the dynamic relationship between the teacher feedback and the impact on student learning outcomes. While feedback has been widely studied in general education contexts, there is a still significant gap in understanding how targeted constructive feedback can directly support the unique needs of English language learners. More specifically, the research will investigate how different forms of feedback, example, corrective, formative, and motivational, contribute to enhancing students' language skills and fostering a positive attitude towards English learning. The need to explore this topic is further amplified by the growing demand for effective language instruction in multicultural and multilingual classrooms. As educators face the challenge of engaging learners with varying levels of language proficiency, teacher feedback emerges as an adaptable tool that can be tailored to meet individual needs. However, current literature lacks sufficient empirical data that links specific feedback strategies to improve language acquisition and increase motivation in senior high school setting. This study addressed these gaps by examining real-world classroom practices and analyzing how teacher feedback influences student outcomes. If successful, the finding from this research could provide a framework for developing more effective feedback strategies that support both linguistic development and motivational enhancement. Ultimately, the study result may contribute to the improvement of English language teaching practices, benefiting both teachers and students by fostering a more supportive feedback-driven learning environment. In terms of significance, this research has the potential to inform educational policies and practices, particularly in the context of senior high school English instruction. Insight from the study may also help guide teacher training programs, emphasizing the importance of feedback in language development and motivation, and enabling educators to better serve their students. By focusing on how feedback shapes the language learning experience, the research seeks to contribute to a deeper understanding of the teaching methods that best support English language learners in their educational journey. Now, moving on to the statement of the problem and research objectives. The research studied the role of teacher feedback and enhancing language acquisition and student motivation, seeks to address the impact of teacher feedback on the language acquisition process and student motivation in English language learning. While feedback is a well-recognized tool in educational settings, there remains a significant gap in understanding how specific types of feedback influence the learning and motivational outcomes of senior high school students, particularly those learning English as a second or foreign language. So, the general objective is to explore the teacher feedback in enhancing language acquisition and student motivation in senior high school English language learners. Now, for the specific objective, first, to investigate the role of different types of teacher feedback. Example, corrective, formative, and motivational. On the language acquisition of senior high school students learning English as a second or foreign language. Second, to determine the effect of teacher feedback on student motivation in learning English, particularly how feedback impacts students' interest, engagement, and persistence in language learning activities. Next, to examine the relationship between feedback timing and student performance, analyzing whether immediate or delayed feedback leads to more significant improvements in language skills, and to identify the feedback strategies perceived as most effective by senior high school students and teachers in enhancing both language acquisition and motivation. Lastly, to develop recommendations for improving feedback practices in English language classrooms based on the findings, aiming to enhance language acquisition and foster higher levels of students' motivation. By achieving these objectives, the study will contribute to a clearer understanding of how teacher feedback can be used as an instructional strategy to optimize language learning outcomes and support student motivation in senior high school classrooms. Moving on to the conceptual framework or theoretical framework. So the research study is grounded in several key theories and concepts that explains the interplay between teacher feedback, language acquisition, and student motivation. This framework integrates linguistic and psychological theories that highlight the role of feedback as a critical tool for promoting learning and motivation in language education. So for the theoretical foundation, first we have um, sociocultural theory by Vygotsky. Vygotsky emphasizes the importance of social interaction in cognitive development. In the context of this study, teacher feedback acts as a form of scaffolding that helps students improve their language skills. According to this theory, language learning occurs through meaningful interaction between learners and more knowledgeable others, such as teachers. Teacher feedback serves as a form of scaffolding that helps students progress within their zone of proximal development or ZPD, where they can accomplish tasks with guidance that they would not be able to complete independently. In the context of this study, um, this theory underscores the role of teacher feedback as both linguistic and motivational tool as students internalize the feedback provided in social contexts and use to improve their language skills. We also have Krashen's input hypothesis. Krashen's input hypothesis posits that language acquisition occurs when learners are exposed to comprehensible input or language slightly beyond their current proficiency level. Feedback serves as a way for teachers to guide students towards this level of comprehensible input by correcting errors and providing linguistic models that scaffolding learning. Feedback that helps students notice gaps in their knowledge and encourages them to engage more complex language structures is instrumental in moving them forward in their language acquisition journey. Therefore, teacher feedback can be viewed as a mechanism for enhancing exposure to that appropriate level of input for learners. Then we also have behaviorist theory of feedback. From a behaviorist perspective, feedback plays a central role in shaping language behavior through reinforcement. So, positive feedback in the form of praise or encouragement reinforces correct responses, leading to their repetition, while corrective feedback discourages incorrect responses, prompting the learners to adjust their behavior. This theory aligns with the study's focus on how different types of feedbacks, whether corrective or motivational, can impact students' learning and behavior, thus enhancing their language acquisition and engagement in learning activities. And lastly, we have self-determination theory. So, it provides a psychological framework for understanding student motivation. It differentiates between intrinsic motivation or engagement in learning for its inherent enjoyment or satisfaction and intrinsic motivation or engagement for external rewards or avoidance of negative consequences. So teacher feedback plays a key role in fostering intrinsic motivation by supporting students' autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Feedback that is specific, constructive, and delivered in a supportive manner can enhance students' sense of competence and autonomy, leading to increased motivation to engage in language learning. This theory is central to understanding how teacher feedback can influence not only students' linguistic outcomes but also their sustained motivation to learn. So, for the conceptual framework for this study integrates the theories outlined above and is illustrated as follows. So, we have the teacher feedback, then types of feedback, corrective, formative, and motivational. And then for the timing of feedback, we have immediate versus delayed. Then we also have language acquisition, comprehensible input by Krashen's input hypothesis. And then we also have linguistic scaffolding by Vygotsky, ZPD. And we also have student motivation, intrinsic and extrinsic. For the intrinsic motivation, we have self-determination theory, and extrinsic motivation, we have behaviorist theory. So in this framework, teacher feedback serves as the independent variable that influences both language acquisition and student motivation, which are the dependent variables. Feedback can take multiple forms: corrective, formative, or motivational. Its effectiveness may vary based on its timing and delivery. Feedback that is immediate may provide students with timely corrections that they can apply in real time, while delayed feedback may encourage deeper reflection and self-assessment. Teacher feedback is hypothesized to impact language acquisition by providing students with the necessary scaffolding to move through stages of language development, in line with Vygotsky's socio-cultural theory and Krashen's input hypothesis. It enables students to engage with increasingly complex language tasks, thus promoting gradual improvement in linguistic competence. Similarly, feedback is expected to affect student motivation, particularly in terms of fostering both intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So according to self-determination theory, feedback that supports students' autonomy and competence is likely to enhance intrinsic motivation, while positive reinforcement from behaviorist theory may increase extrinsic motivation by rewarding successful learning behaviors. Now, for the summary of key variables, we have the independent variable, which is teacher feedback, which is the corrective, formative, motivational, and immediate versus delayed. While ang dependent variables, first we have the language acquisition. It is measured through improvements in language proficiency, accuracy, and fluency. Then we also have student motivation, or it measured through self-reported motivation levels, engagement in tasks, and persistence. Now, in conclusion, this conceptual framework draws on established theories of language, learning, and motivation to frame the study's investigation into the role of teacher feedback. By analyzing how feedback influences both the acquisition of English as a second language and the motivation to learn, the study seeks to provide insights into effective teaching practices that can enhance outcomes for senior high school English language learners. Now, moving on to the definition of terms. In the context of this study, the following key terms are defined to provide clarity on how they are understood and measured in this study. First, we have the teacher feedback. So operationally, defined as the information provided by the teachers to students regarding their performance, behavior, or understanding in the classroom. Feedback can be corrective, or identifying and correcting mistakes. Formative, providing guidance to improve learning. And then we also have motivational, which is encouraging positive attitude toward learning. Then we have corrective feedback. Feedback that directly addresses and corrects errors made by students and their language use. It involves pointing out mistakes in grammar, vocabulary, or pronunciation, and providing the correct form or explanation to guide improvement. We also have formative feedback. So, Feedback given during the learning process is aimed at enhancing student understanding and learning outcomes. It provides constructive suggestions and guidance to help students reflect on their progress and improve their language skills. We also have motivational feedback. Feedback intended to encourage and inspire students to maintain or increase their effort and engagement in learning. So this type of feedback is focused on boosting students' confidence, interest, and positive attitude toward language learning. We also have language acquisition. So the process by which students develop the ability to understand, speak, read, and write in a second language. In this case, this is English. For the purposes of this study, language acquisition is operationally defined as measurable improvements in the student's linguistic proficiency, including accuracy, fluency, and complexity of language use. Then we also have comprehensible input. It refers to language input that is slightly beyond the current language proficiency level of the learner, as proposed by Krashen's input hypothesis. So in this study, comprehensible input is understood as the language input that helps learners progress in their language acquisition, facilitated through teacher feedback. Then we also have intrinsic motivation. So motivation that comes from within the learner, driven by personal interest, enjoyment, or satisfaction in completing a task. So in this study, intrinsic motivation is operationally defined as the student's internal drive to engage in language learning activities for personal growth and satisfaction. Then we also have extrinsic motivation. Motivation that comes from external factors such as rewards, praise, or grades. For the purposes of this research, extrinsic motivation refers to the student's engagement in learning activities to receive external validation or avoid negative consequences. Then we have zone of proximal development, or ZPD, a concept from Vygotski's sociocultural theory referring to the gap between what learners can do independently and what they can achieve with guidance and support. In this study, the ZPD is used to describe how teacher feedback serves as a scaffold to help students achieve higher levels of language proficiency. Then we also have self-determination theory. So, a psychological theory that focuses on the motivation behind choices people make without external influence or interference. So, in the context of this study, self-determination theory explains how teacher feedback affects student motivation by supporting their own autonomy, competence, and relatedness, thereby enhancing extrinsic motivation. Then we also have senior high school English language learners. So refers to students in senior high school, specifically grade 11, who are learning English as a second or foreign language. So in this study, these learners are the primary participants whose language acquisition and motivation are influenced by teacher feedback. By defining these terms, the study ensures a clear understanding of the main variables and concepts, providing a consistent basis for analyzing the role of teacher feedback in language acquisition and student motivation. Then we also have the methodology. So the research studied the role of teacher feedback in enhancing language acquisition and student motivation will employ a mixed methods approach combining both qualitative and quantitative research methods to comprehensively investigate the impact of teacher feedback on language acquisition and student motivation. The chosen methodology is designed to provide a holistic understanding of the relationship between teacher feedback, student learning outcomes, and motivation in English language classrooms. We have first research design. So for the research design, the study will utilize a convergent parallel mixed methods design where both quantitative and qualitative data will be collected simultaneously. The two sets of data will be analyzed independently and then merged to draw comprehensive conclusions. These designs allow for deeper exploration of how teacher feedback influences language acquisition and motivation from multiple perspectives. So we also have the participants. So the participants of this study will be senior high schools English language learners from select schools, particularly in an environment where English is taught as a second or foreign language. Teachers of these students will also be involved to provide insights into their feedback strategies. For the sample size, approximately 20 senior high schools English language learners and 1 English teachers will be recruited. So, a student sample will be representative of various proficiency levels in English. Sampling technique, a purposive sampling method, will be used to select participants who are directly engaged in English language learning, ensuring that they have received regular feedback from their teachers. Moving on to the data collections, we have quantitative data collection, wherein first we have the questionnaires. A structured questionnaire will be developed to measure students' perceptions of the different types of feedback they receive and how it influences their language acquisition and motivation. The questionnaire will also gather data on the students' self-reported language proficiency levels and motivation based on a 5-point Likert scale. We also have pre and post tests. To assess language acquisition, students will complete a language proficiency test at the beginning and in the end of the study. The test will evaluate their performance in grammar, vocabulary, and language fluency. The difference between pre and post test scores will indicate changes in language acquisition. Then we also have qualitative data collection. So first we have the interview. Semi-structured interviews will be conducted with both teachers and students. Teacher will be interviewed to explore their feedback strategies, types of feedback given, and perception of how feedback influences students' learning and motivation. Students will be interviewed to gather in deep perspective on how they perceive feedback and its role in their language learning experience. Then we also have classroom observation. So non-participant classroom observation will be conducted to document real-time teacher-student interactions and the types of feedback provided during lessons. Observational data will provide context and complement the findings from the interviews and questionnaires. Then we also have the data analysis. First, we have the quantitative data analysis. So the questionnaire data will be analyzed using descriptive statistics, mean, frequency, and standard deviation. So to summarize, students' perception of feedback, inferential statistic, or such as paired t-test and ANOVA, will be used to compare pre and post-test scores, determine the effectiveness of different feedback types, and identify a relationship between feedback and motivation. Then we also have qualitative data analysis. Interviews will be transcribed and coded thematically using a content analysis approach. So themes related to teacher feedback, its perceived effectiveness, and its impact on student motivation and language acquisition will be identified and analyzed. Data from classroom observation will be analyzed to support and triangulate the findings from the interviews. Then we also have ethical consideration. So ethical approval will be obtained from relevant institutional review boards. Informed consent will be obtained from all participants, ensuring that they understand the study purpose and procedures. Participants' confidentiality will be maintained and all data will be anonymous to protect their identities. Then we also have the limitation of the study. While this study aims to provide valuable insights into the role of teacher feedback in language acquisition and motivation, it may be limited by the size and scope of the sample. The findings may not be generalizable to all educational contexts, particularly those outside of senior high school English language classrooms. Furthermore, the study will rely on self-reported data, which may introduce some biases. Then, for the expected outcomes, the study is expected to provide a deeper understanding of how different types of teacher feedback influence language acquisition and motivation among senior high school English language learners. It will offer evidence-based recommendation for teachers and how to provide feedback that enhances both learning outcomes and student engagement. These findings can contribute to the improvement of feedback practices in English language education and serve as a basis for further research in similar educational settings. So this comprehensive methodology will allow the study to achieve its objectives by providing both quantitative measurements and qualitative insights into the role of teacher feedback and enhancing language acquisition and student motivation. Lastly, we have the references. First, we have the Amadi 2018. This is an APA format. We have Al-Haisoni M 2021, and Ellis 2019, Ganapati M and KRS 2020. Then Hamid R and Lee Y 2021. Then these references highlights recent studies focusing on teacher feedback, language acquisition, and motivation in second language learning, providing a modern and relevant foundation for the research study. So that ends my presentation. Thank you.